In the Hall of the Bodytenders. Written and read by Michael Vrasitulis. Among all the dark wonders for which the land of Angor was renowned, the host of Obedient was the most infamous. The Obedient fought in the front lines of the Magocrats' wars. The Obedient protected the state's vaults filled with treasure and most powerful magical artifacts. And most importantly, the Obedient guarded the temple of the Black Sun, wherein did lie in godly dreaming the numinous child. The Obedient were soldiers like no others. They knew not pain or fear. No wound, however severe, could definitively stop them, and most importantly, they lacked the ability to disobey. The Obedient were soldiers like no others, for they were not men, at least no longer. The Obedient were not chosen or bred to be elite soldiers. They were made, constructed from Angor's fallen enemies. Soldiers who died opposing the Magocrats' mighty armies. The bodies were initially cleaned and their unnecessary and obstructory parts carefully removed, a preparatory step for the next stage. Then specially made enchanted and rune-covered armor was grafted upon the flesh. And finally the embryonic Obedient would be brought to the Hall of Reawakening, where a spirit would be summoned, its will bound and forced to enter and inhabit the prepared body. Thusly was born an Obedient, a creature whose sole destiny was slaughter and eternal servitude. Nathani was a Bodytender. Throughout her young life, she had never displayed any significant magical talent, something that severely restricted her path in Angorian society. Yet in the art of preparing the dead that were to be Angor's most fearsome defenders, she had found her true vocation, and her great skill had earned her great respect amongst those who worked their crafts within the House of Obedience. And thus it was that the Hall of the Bodytenders became Nathani's true home, and throughout the years many bodies had passed through her to reawakening. This time they had brought her a young Savanian soldier, a handsome lad, no older than 20. He had been captured in the last naval battle and killed carefully in order to provide a durable vessel. Nathani removed the shroud that covered the corpse and examined it carefully. For a moment, she simply stood and marveled at the dead beauty. His body was pale, slender, and muscular, with delicate strains of black hair decorating it like fine lace. His face bore fair, noble features, and his head was crowned with glistening black curls. Nathani gazed dreamily for one more moment, and then she began. First she cleaned the body and shaved it completely. Then she carefully removed the ears and nose and sewed shut the mouth. Then she turned the body around, and as she did with the mouth, sewed shut the anus. Finally, the time to remove the genitals had come. Nathani turned the body around once more, and before starting the final procedure, she let herself gaze upon the body once again. He was now an otherworldly creature, a pale demon who had come from the black below to spread most beautiful nightmares in the world of men. Pretending to perform an examination, she let her hands glide upon his body. When her hands reached the genitals, she took the parts of his manhood tightly into her palms and let herself feel deeply. A hypnotic sensation overtook her, and she imagined that she was holding the scepter of a king of gods. A few moments passed, yet it felt like a day in eternity. And then she let go. A shame, she thought, and began performing the last removal. For the next few nights, the exquisite corpse haunted Nathani's dreams. He appeared in the nebulous marshlands of her slumber, pale and hairless, his ears and nose removed, yet his manhood untouched. The otherworldly figure pursued her through swamp and fog, with his member erect and pulsating. The glorious sword of pale flesh cut through the veils of mist, and Nathani ran and ran, until she realized she never really wanted to run away from him. Upon the occurrence of that thought, the dream undressed her. She lay down on the muddy soil with her legs open and waiting. And when he came upon her and invaded her, Nathani cried out in horrid pleasure, and her thunderous voice shook the foundation of the dream itself. She violently awoke and found herself in a pool of sweat, her nightgown torn in the struggle of slumber, her fingers grasping firmly between her legs. The dream came to her again and again, night after night, and now even her thoughts during the day were haunted by the beautiful demon and his pale sword. In each body she tended to, she saw the shadow of a burning obsession. Each incision turned in her mind into a caress offered to him. Each orifice sewed shut felt like a deep, dark kiss. And soon Nathani could no longer resist the torturing call of transgressive desire, and one night, when the whole of the Bodytenders stood empty save for her and the corpses, she removed her clothes and climbed like an excited child upon a body she had shaped into an eidolon of the fair demon of her dreams. A poor imitation it might have been, yet as she slid rhythmically up and down the cold body and planted soft kisses on the pale skin, dream and waking blended together for a brief moment, and for that swift blink of an eye Nathani had known a form of contentment bearing momentary eternality. The next day Nathani found great commotion in the House of Obedience. A reverberating echo of voices led her to the Hall of Armorers, where a group of summoners, including the High Binder, were gathered around a body that had been brought from the Chamber of Cold Sleep. The summoners moved around the body examining it, and when their movement created a small gap in the human wall that limited Nathani's vision, she saw that the body was a beautiful pale demon. A silent yet potent whirlwind of emotion grasped her, and unable to move or act in any meaningful way, she simply stood for hours in the deep shadows of the hall, watching as the summoners performed their magical examinations, and the armorers showed them designs and strange runes. Later that day, Nathani approached the High Binder and inquired with feigned professional curiosity what the commotion was about. The old man informed her that the examined body had been selected for an experimental procedure that constituted an attempt to create a particularly powerful obedient. He explained that usually simple lesser spirits were chosen to inhabit the prepared bodies, yet this time the summoners would attempt to bind an angel from the black below. Nathani asked the High Binder for permission to watch the ritual, claiming that this would improve the preparation of bodies. Her professional reputation allowed for this excuse, and the High Binder agreed. The Hall of Reawakening lay in liminal dimness, illuminated feebly by the softly dancing flames of ritual candles. In the chamber's center lay the body, now dressed in ruined dark metal, surrounded by strange symbols that glistened in the otherworldly light. Encircling the symbols and the body stood the summoners, masked and robed, pointing their wands toward the vessel to be filled, and chanting. Nathani watched the scene from a dark corner, standing within a protective circle the High Binder had drawn for her. That corner felt like a balcony overlooking a dark alien world. The High Binder uttered horrid words, and the summoners repeated them. The ground shook, and the candles flickered. A terrible chorus of distant screams filled the chamber, and the infant, obedient, rose. It stretched out its arms as if it were seeking wings, and released a deep, melodic yet terrifying cry, as best it could with its sealed mouth. The High Binder approached the newborn creature and began to speak, only to immediately fall silent as an armored hand tore out his windpipe. Those of the summoners who were not swift enough in their fleeing were slaughtered with indifference, as one would crush an insect. Now the creature Nathani stood alone in the Hall of Reawakening. He looked upon her, and she looked upon him. Nathani stepped out of the protection of her circle, yet the creature remained unmoved. She approached him, and he waited. She faced him and looked into his eyes, and she saw cloud and darkness and scorching fire. She lay a pale hand upon the cold metal grafted upon his face. She softly smiled, and she felt the swift force of his armored hand push through her lower abdomen like a horseman's spear. And in those eternal moments that precede death, Nathani knew complete contentment, penetrated by the beautiful demon of her dreams.